He had given me a cock-loaded gun and told me, if this happens, shoot him. I got the gun and I was holding him at gunpoint.
On your personal life, was the marriage a good marriage at the beginning, or was it a strained marriage?
From the very beginning, our relationship was rocky. We were married 1 week when I caught him in his first lie. Moved into an apartment, and so instantly he began stalking me. And so through that time of him stalking me, like, there was slashed tires, there was chemicals poured into an engine. He broke into my apartment and was watching me sleep. It was extremely traumatic.
Be really scary, Leah, right?
Terrifying. The thing that pushed me, I think, completely over the edge was,
this is where you come from. What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? How do you adapt, survive, overcome, set yourself free? Don't forget to hit that follow, subscribe button, share, like this thing out, like it out, get it to whomever. If you get something good out of it, like it up, share it. I want to give a shout out to Mike Morowski. He set me up with Leah Howard, and I love it when alums from the show give me people to interview, because they're always great people. And Leah Howard is a fascinating story and person. I had this telephone conversation with her not too long ago, and I got off the phone thinking, my gosh, what a fascinating story. What an unbelievable story. Just to give you a little bit of, and you might have seen or heard of Leah, because she was on interviewed by Dr. Phil. So if anybody follows Dr. Phil, you might have heard a little bit about Leah. But Leah Howard was a wife, a mother, a pediatric nurse who was desperately trying to get out of a broken marriage. And so she got into this crazy marriage and tried to get out of it. And she got stalked by the ex-husband, and she finally snapped, and it landed her in prison. I think she served about 4 years. And it's kind of one of those stories like, what would I have done? What would I have done if I was in that situation? And the stalking and the desperation and the anxiety and everything that was going on around this was a lot. And I think it'll be interesting to get into this to see how she did snap. But there was a gun used, and she fired it, and she didn't know if she had killed him, maimed him, missed him, whatever. And when she called, that's where she was in her head at that time. She just knew that she shot, and then she ran out of the house. But she found herself in prison. She found her purpose, and she now manages prison ministry that's in 4 states. She's a public speaker, and she vows to give hope to the brokenhearted and the people that she left behind. So I just told her before we got on here, it's so cool when I interview people who use their experience of what they've gone through to be able to help people. I love it. I can't wait to unpack all this. Before we do, I want to recognize our show sponsor, Auto Plaza Direct. Who likes spending a couple of weekends walking car lots looking for a car? I don't think anybody really likes that. Then you spend 4 or 5 hours in the dealership to buy a car. It's kind of like a root canal appointment. Well, there's a better way to take away all that pain and hassle of getting a car. Auto Plaza Direct. They are your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go find that car for you. They'll negotiate your best price. They also offer you warranties and financing. It's full service. Go to autoplazadirect.com to get started with your personal car concierge, the new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Auto Plaza Direct. Tell them Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. Hello, Leah. How are you?
Hello.
Thank you for coming and talking and being interviewed today.
Thank you for allowing me to share my crazy story.
It is quite a story, Leah. I mean, you had me. I was sitting in the car that day, and we were talking on the phone, and I was thinking, wow, it kind of is like one of those stories that you pull up on a Lifetime channel or something. And it's like one of those true stories. And then you wonder how it ends. And yeah, it's one of those. And, you and I were just talking about, and I'm sure I'm jumping ahead here, and we'll get into the story, but I thought it was pretty fascinating that all this comes about, and you do all this and go to prison, and you kind of find yourself in what you want to do and your passion and your purpose. But the person that you shot, the person that was stalking you, you went back into the prison for a victim class. in a prison with your ex-husband, which is, I can't wait to jump into that. Um, but tell me a little bit, Leah, like what was it like for you growing up? Because I know that you got married really early as a kid, like 17. What was life like for you growing up as a kid?
Yeah, I was raised on a farm, born and raised in Missouri. And when I say farm, I'm not talking about like 3 acres and a couple chickens. I'm talking about crops and pigs and cows and all the things.
We're out in
And
Missouri. I'm here in Missouri. Whereabouts?
out in the sticks of Bowling Green, Missouri.
Okay, Bowling Green.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that area. So I was
Okay.
raised out there, raised on a farm with all boys. And so I just knew when I was a little girl, when I left the house, that I had to grab a club, a stick, or something, because something on that farm was going to come at me, usually a rooster. And
Hmm.
of course, I never tried to seek out using the stick, but I had to protect myself. So that, and, I
You
think
said
there's
it
a
was
lot.
all boys. Was this all brothers?
Well, I had 2 brothers, one older and one younger, but I also had a whole lot of boy cousins. So
Okay.
they called me a tomboy, and it fit very well. I was a tough little firecracker.
Okay. And I guess you had chores where you took care of all these roosters and pigs and
Oh,
cattle and
yes.
crops and,
Yes, yes.
uh,
As a child, I always loved our pigs, and I actually have a potbelly pig still to this day who's my pet, potty trained. And so I would go out and lay with the pigs and slop the pigs and clean the pig pen and gather the eggs and all that. Yeah, that was my chore. And a lot of gardening, a whole lot of bean
a lot of
picking and
gardening.
weeding. What fun.
Uh-huh. So your school, what was it like? Did you have like a normal growing up school, high school experience?
Yeah, it was pretty normal. I had probably, I don't know, 7 friends who are our core, but I was one of those people who really got along with everyone. People in our school, it was a small school, but there wasn't a whole lot of cliques and stuff. So high school was pretty normal, except for I got pregnant my senior year. And so I moved from Bowling Green, Missouri, all the way to Ohio. I met my ex-husband. He was stationed in Kansas, and he came home with an Army buddy. So when I found out I was pregnant, we got married and moved out to Ohio, which is where all this crazy story comes from.
Well, how crazy must that have been at a senior in high school? You get pregnant and you marry a guy and he takes you to Ohio, and I'm sure you didn't know anybody in Ohio. What was that like?
It was extremely traumatic. Not only did I not know anyone, but I was raised in a little tiny community my entire life, knew everyone from
Yeah.
kindergarten to a senior year. And now I am pregnant and married, going to high school. And there was probably 10, 20 times bigger than where I came from. So it was extremely traumatic. And then also, I had moved there on December 19th, and right after the new year, I started not only going to high school, but working full time as a nursing assistant in a nursing home. So there was so many transitions. Sometimes when I think about my life and all that I've been through, I think back to that time when it was hard at the age of 17 to adapt to all that. And of course, I moved there in December. In June is when I had our first child, and the following June, the second child. So it was a whirlwind while I was working full time throughout the whole thing. So
Wow. And what was it that got you into the nursing part of things, Leah? What was that, something you'd always thought of, or is it something that was just an opening and you went for it and took it?
well, all the above. Most of my life, I always wanted to be a nurse. Ironically, about 5 of those 7 individuals that I talked about being my friends were
Hmm.
all nurses. It's just we all turned out that way. And
That's
so
funny.
also, like, nursing came easy for me. As a nurse's aide, I loved the people. I loved what I was doing. But even when I was in nursing school, grades came really easy to memorize healthcare things, and just love taking care of people. But especially when I got into pediatrics, I just love children so much and just love taking care of them. It was just a joy when I became a nurse.
And gosh, what would you have been, 19 years old when you had the two kids?
18 with the first and 19 with the
Yeah.
second.
So a mother of 2 kids at 19
And working full time. Yes,
and
sir.
working full time.
Yep,
Wow.
it was a
Well,
lot.
well, so and in this time period was how long did you guys know each other before you got married?
Approximately 9 months, I would say. So he came
Okay.
home in April, and then we got married in December. So it was a
Okay.
very short period of time. And uh, as sad as it is, when I look back at our high school yearbook and I circled the names of how many people, it was like a third of our class got pregnant. I'm not justifying what I did, but where I was raised, sadly enough, it was more the norm than anything. When you're raised on way out in the country, it's not like you can go out to clubs very much or go on the
All right.
standard normal dates. And so there's a lot of driving around and parking in fields and those kind of things when you're a country kid. Oh, well, especially back in the day when I was being raised.
Sure. Yeah. And then so you're getting along, Leah. I mean, you've had the kids, you're getting in, you like the nursing. On your personal life, was the marriage a good marriage at the beginning, or was it a strained marriage from the beginning?
It was very much a strained marriage from the beginning. We were married 1 week when I caught him in his first lie. So
Okay.
the way I was raised, uh, liars are completely repulsive. Lying in general is repulsive. You be honest, you have character and integrity. And so I caught him in his first lie the first week. And throughout our marriage, it was, even during that time, it was a roller coaster. Usually I'd catch him in a fight. We would fight for 2 weeks. I would be very angry, build up my emotional walls, and then he would build my trust back up. And then 2 weeks later, I'd catch him into another lie, and this whole roller coaster would start all over again. So from the very beginning, our relationship was rocky, but both of us came from families where you do not get a divorce. No matter what happens, you
Okay.
just stick it through and just push through. So that's what we
So
did.
what like in his world, like for a lie, I'm trying to think, like, was he lying that, he said he was gonna be home at whatever time and he went somewhere else, or was it like what kind of lies is he throwing at you?
Yes, all of that. The one that I found was, he said, I don't know, he got $20 out of an ATM and I found the receipt and it was $40. But why did you
Okay.
even bother lying? Or he said he was going to work, but come to find out he was really golfing. Or he's going to be home for dinner, but then he went out with his buddies and he gets home at 2 a.m. when I'm going to nursing school, got a job,
Uh-huh.
raising the 2 kids. So it was a
Just constant.
constant battle. Yeah. And
Just to lie about lie. It wasn't,
yes.
sometimes didn't need to.
Right. And also, I don't want to throw shade on him because there is forgiveness in our
Sure.
relationship, but a lot of narcissistic tendencies. So the world thought he was the hero and thought he was the best thing since sliced white bread. But at home, it was a completely different individual. So
Yeah.
socially and at home was two different people.
So I'm trying to think, because I remember when we were talking on the phone, because you both believed that you didn't get a divorce, you were married for a while.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Well, we ended up being married for 21 years, but I do need
21
to back
years.
up just a little bit. So we talked about me being married having a baby at 18 and another one at 19. Well, in 2004, my mother passed away the same week that I had my last child. So it was a planned child. I gave birth the same week my mother passed away, and of course the child was by him. So that was our third child, but I was much older. I was 32 years old when this happened. And through that situation, we started going to Christian marriage counseling. So I had given my life to the Lord when I was 21 years old, went to church 3 times a week. And then here we are, church going people, and our marriage is just on the rocks, going through 4.5 years of Christian marriage counseling with this baby in tow. So that's what was
Was
going
that
on.
helping?
Well, I think in a lot of ways it helped me because throughout our marriage, every single issue that we ever had was my fault. And it was mostly my fault because I was just crazy or I was just paranoid because my tummy told me there was a lie brewing, but I couldn't really put my finger on it, which makes you feel a little emotionally unbalanced. So it was good to hear after we had been to marriage counseling that it wasn't just me, that I wasn't just imagining it, that it really was an issue. We really did have problems. And he really, really had a problem with lying. And also around the same time that our daughter was born, he developed a gambling problem. So he was having people at our house all the time. He was saying that he was at home with our baby, but really he was having the older kids watch the baby while he was out gambling all night. But I didn't know about that either until I caught him in that for a few times too. So it was just, by that point, it was spinning out of control. When we went to the marriage counselor, after 4.5 years, met with me privately, and he said, Leah, God hates divorce and I hate divorce, and it doesn't matter how beautiful you are. It doesn't matter how successful you are. It doesn't matter how good of a wife you are. He is who he is, and he's probably never going to change. And at that moment, I actually told God that if he was going to make me stay with this man, that me and God could not be friends. You really shouldn't tell God that. It doesn't work out very well. So in that very moment, not only did I give up, but I also just started living like a dumb teenager. I'm like, if I've been good all this time and it didn't do me any good whatsoever, then I'm just going to go off the rails, I suppose. Not a mature thought, but I think a lot of people who go through divorce kind of go a little wonky for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause you get completely out of your routine, obviously.
Yes.
You've been married for 21 years and all of a sudden you have a whole different life and what you have to do and how you do it. And you were married so young at 17.
Yes,
so you were probably thinking you missed out on something, you know, all those college years or whatever that wild life is that you have concocted up in your head. So then what happens?
Well, then I leave him and I move into an apartment. And so just so everybody knows, like, we were living in a really nice house in a really nice town. It looked like we had the American dream, especially from the outside, right? People who didn't know what we were going through probably thought we had it all together. So I moved into an apartment, and so instantly he began stalking me. And so through that time of him stalking me, like, there was slashed tires, there was chemicals poured into an engine. He broke into my apartment and was watching me sleep, which is a completely freaky feeling. He would follow me around everywhere I went. I eventually got a restraining order, but it really wasn't all that helpful because you have to be caught in the moment. And a lot of people who have went to the point of stalking someone, the restraining order can be more of a temptation to see if you can beat it. So it was really hard to catch him when he was stalking me. But the thing that pushed me, I think, completely over the edge was my children at the time of this 21-year ending part were 18, 19, and 6.
Okay.
And he was telling all these horrible things to the adult children, but he was also saying it to the little one. And as sad as it is, when the little one was born, the same week my mom died, she was like my everything. She became my idol and my angel from heaven because she kind of replaced my mother, who I was really close to. And so he would take her and from me and tell her, your mother doesn't love you, because if she did, she would come home. Or say, you know, I'm going to get one visit with her and you'll never see her again. And he would take her away to places and not tell me where he took her. And so it
That had to be really scary, Leah, right?
Terrifying, because again, she was my everything. And so that's what led to the major climax that happened.
And if I remember right, you had you been dating a police officer? Is that what? Okay.
At the hospital, I started dating a man who was an ex-police officer, and he was in security. And he had already heard when he got hired there that I was going through a divorce and it was really ugly, and he was kind of warned to stay away from me. but he had given me a cock-loaded gun and told me, if this happens, shoot him. And so that gun had been in my possession from, I think, probably March until September. So it wasn't like he gave me a gun, I instantly went and shot somebody. No, it was in my possession for all those months. However, when right before all this came to a head, it was, I don't know, 4 or 5 days before that, my ex-husband had made a threat that he was going to go get my little one, who was 6, from the 18-year-old daughter who was nearby the hospital, and he was going to go get her, and I would never see her again. And so I actually left the hospital, and I went and got my 2 daughters and took them to my apartment while I could see him driving around our apartment, through the windows. And at that point, I moved the cock-loaded gun from the very tip top of my bedroom closet to the main living space in a drawer. Okay. So a few days later, I'm getting ready to go to work, and I was reliving the past weekend and all the trauma and all the things that had happened. And so I thought, okay, I have to work the next 3 nights, and I cannot afford any of this chaos in my life. And so even though I had a restraining order, I tell people I've done some dumb things, but at the top of the dumb list was, I thought that day, okay, I'm going to have him over and we're going to talk about it, and I'm going to convince him that I'm not coming home. And so that.
And at this time, Leah, because I was going to ask you earlier, had you guys been communicating at all back and forth once you got the restraining order, or was it just him stalking you and causing all this anxiety and strife and whatever, or had you guys been or this was your time where you said, hey, let's put an end to this. Let's try to see if I can talk some sense into him.
Well, technically you're not supposed to communicate. So a lot of it, we were not communicating. However, he would even call the hospital where I was managing and ask to speak with me. And so again, it was hard for anybody to prove that, right? Because it was on a.
Well, how would it work with the kids? Because were you sharing custody?
Yeah, pretty much sharing custody. If I remember right, it was a while back, but I feel as if they let us communicate through text message for that reason.
Okay.
However, a lot of the communication too would go through our children. So we were trying to manage having kids and the restraining order all at the same time.
Yeah, sounds like a lot.
Yes.
Okay, so the night that this all takes place, you say you're going to call him up. We're going to talk like rational adults. And he comes over?
Yes, it was actually in the morning because I worked night shift. So I had woken up that morning and thought, oh goodness, I've got to work the next 3 days. I have got to get this situation taken care of. And so I invited him over so that we could talk, and he came over and we talked probably in total, maybe 3 hours. I don't know.
Wow. Okay.
But in that time that we were talking, there was times when it was more peaceful than other times, and it was getting more heated. But he was texting on his phone, and I said, you sent 2 texts. He said, no, I didn't. And I said, yes, you did. Now, remember, I had been lied to for 21 years. 21. And now I'm stalked and all this dissension, whatever. And so the argument kept getting more and more heated. He crossed his legs and he put his arm on the back of the couch, and he said, because we had already had a guardian ad litem, which is someone who says, let me evaluate the 2 parents and figure out who should get this kid, the primary residence. And so the guardian ad litem had already said that pretty much I was going to get our daughter, right? So he puts his arm over the back of the couch and he says, you know that even though you're going to end up getting her, that they have to give me rights to see her, and I'm the dad, and all I got to have her is one time, and I will be gone, and you will never see her again. Unless, and he had backed his truck up to the door of my apartment and put the tailgate down. He said, unless you pack up your stuff right now and go home with me.
Wow.
And so at that point, it became more volatile, and I got the gun, and I was holding him at gunpoint and had no plans on shooting him, except for I just wanted to scare the tar out of him so he'd leave me alone, right? That's my whole point at the moment. And then while I'm holding him, and he's saying, I'm going to stop, I'm going to leave you alone, I'll never do these things again. You know, you can have Abby. Well, of course he's saying that. I've got him at gunpoint. Duh, right? And so in that very moment, a text message comes up on his phone, and I could see that he texts 2 people, right? Which is not important. That's not the point of it. But in that moment, my brain said, you're never gonna stop. And I just started pulling the trigger. No rationale whatsoever, not thinking about a thing, just started pulling the trigger. And by the way, I had never shot a pistol in my entire life, and I've always hated guns with every fiber of my being. But anyway, so
did you even know how many times you fired it?
Nope, had no idea. Could not tell you if I fired it once, 20 times. I couldn't tell you. Could not tell you. So wow. After I was shooting at him, not even knowing if I hit him, I just want you to picture this, and when you do, you'll know that like there wasn't premeditation. I had on a pair of pajama pants that would not even stay up on my waist. I had on these thick wool like hunting socks, no shoes whatsoever. I had on, a ratty sweatshirt. And by the way, if anybody knows me, they know I do not go in public unless I'm beautified, like, right? And so if I'm going to like be on the news, I'm going to have my hair done, like my makeup, I'm going to be cute. Well, no, I had just woken up and invited him over. I had this horrible bun. I mean, it's just a mess. So anyway, I throw the gun. I don't even know where it went at the time. I had no idea. Threw the gun, grabbed my cell phone, and took off running through the apartment complex. And I am crying and screaming and hyperventilating, and I call the police. And I tell them, I shot my husband. It's this horrible audio recording. It's horrendous. And I was on hold for like 10 minutes. But anyway, I told them I shot my husband, and I told them I was going to hide in the woods until I heard the police cars because I was afraid to come out. And they asked me where the gun was, and I didn't know where the gun was. I just said I threw it, and they asked me if I hit him, and I had no idea whatsoever. So I went in the woods, and I was there until I heard the police cars, and then I came out and, of course, laid on my belly and surrendered. So.
Wow. I mean, it really is something like you see on a Lifetime movie channel. Something, I mean, a husband stalking, and the wife snaps and shoots and runs, and there you are. Before we get into this, because I really interested, like what happens from that moment, what's going through your mind. Before you do, I want to recognize for people out there, do you not like how you show up online? And this is one of those things where this is one of those shows where I think we have a lot of people that might have something where they're not liking how they show up online. Well, there's somebody that can help you out there, and there's hope. It's called Discoverability, and they can help you whether you're trying to build reputation from scratch, repairing your search results after a negative news story, or even if you're just trying to position yourself a little bit better against your businesses and the competition. Discoverability can also help you how you're portrayed on the popular AI services like ChatGPT. To learn more, visit discoverability.co. They're even launching a do-it-yourself option, a course for individuals who want to take on their search results on their own budget and speed. Listeners of Nightmare Success can take $100 off the DIY SEO service course with a coupon code Nightmare Success. Drew Chapin is the guy that does this. He's really brilliant. He's been somebody that was on this show, and he's helped so many people out along the way. And the other person I want to recognize is the White Collar Support Group. Sponsored by the Nightmare Success Podcast is sponsored by the White Collar Support Group, the world's first support group devoted to people navigating the white collar criminal justice journey. I'm a member of the White Collar Support Group, and I can tell you this is a bunch of people who help each other through the criminal justice journey for free. Whether you're just starting your journey or you've made it through to the other side, this is a great space for you. Join us on Zoom Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern. For information, go to prisonist.org. That's prisonist.org. Start here. Okay, Leah. You're laying, they handcuff you. I can't imagine what's going through your mind. What in the world are you thinking? That, you're a nurse. You've just done, I don't know how many hours, and you've woken up and you've had this conversation with your husband for 3 hours, and you've shot him with a gun that you haven't even shot before. What's going through your mind?
Well, I can honestly say that is the worst moment of my entire life. I was screaming hysterically. Again, they had this recorded. It's part of my court hearing. Me screaming, oh my God, what have I done? I've destroyed him. I've destroyed his life. Is he okay? God, forgive me. Like, it's horrific. The PTSD from that moment was so horrible. I thought I was going to throw up or pass out. Like, even the police, I was trying to take off my sweatshirt. They were rolling down the windows and blasting the air. I'm sure they thought I was going to, make a mess of the back of their car. And I was like that for days afterwards. Like, the regret, the fear, everything. And so I had been in jail for about 3 days, and the only way that I could go to sleep in jail was to think about how I was going to commit suicide when I got out. My ex-husband was a financial planner, and my life insurance even covered suicide. So I thought, well, that's the only way. And I had $1 million life insurance. So I thought, that's the only way I'm going to be able to take care of my kids now. So I asked my friends to take me for a walk in the woods, which is where I felt closest to my creator. And as I was walking through the woods, like, if I looked up, I thought I was going to get sick, or to the side or back anywhere. And I just felt like the Lord was talking to my heart and said, look, you cannot face what all is up ahead of you. You cannot face everything you've lost. The only way you're going to make this is to put your hands in mine and take one step at a time, right? And so I had to remember that it's one step at a time, right? Like, everything that I was going to face is too overwhelming. Mm-hmm. So that's exactly what I did, was one step at a time. It was horrific. And I was still pretty suicidal for quite some time after that. And also the court system.
When did you find out? I'm curious, Leah, in that time period, when did you find out how he was? Like, what had happened?
Well, when I asked the police officer when they called for the medic or whatever, I said, is he okay? Right now I'm like, is he okay? I mean, I just shot him, and now I'm, I want him to be okay. And mm-hmm. They said, from what I understood, they said it was a gut shot, right? So I am thinking of all the things, whether it could be stomach or bowel or whatever. But then later, when I got home after 3 days in jail and people bailed me out, when I got home, I found out that it was a shoulder shot and an ear shot, not a gut shot. Not that that's better or worse. I just didn't have any idea if I hit him whatsoever.
So you got out on bail. So what were the next steps that happened with this process?
Well, my daughter, who was 6 at the time, she had slept with me basically from the time she was born. And the courts wanted me to confess that it was premeditated. So they said, if you confess that it's premeditated, we'll let you see your daughter. Until then, you cannot see your daughter. So that was horrific. I would wake up in the middle of the night screaming her name. It was terrible. And then I was out for 9 months. And of course, I lost my job as a nurse, right? Because people who are going for felonies do not get to be a nurse. So I lost that. And so I did some odd end jobs and was a hot mess. I just have to tell you, I was a hot mess because before all this incident, I had no criminal record whatsoever. Maybe I had 3 or 4 speeding tickets my whole life. Always had this major fear of police officers. And I thought, because I watched the news, that all people who are incarcerated are horrible people. And it's not fair that they get to watch the TV 24/7 because I'm working to pay the taxes so that they could have this easy life. And I thought it was unfair, which was completely irrational and judgmental of me, which it's kind of funny how it works when we're judgy and then we end up in that same situation. But anyway,
when you actually are in that position. Yeah.
I know. So then I was out for 9 months, and then they gave me a plea bargain, and they told me that if I took it to trial and I lost, that I could get up to 23 years in prison. And so I actually spoke to my family about this, and they offered me a plea deal of 4 years if I would plead guilty to 2 felonious assaults and an abduction, as opposed to attempted murder, kidnapping, all these other things. And so I knew that it is important for me to get back to my family, so I took the 4-year plea deal.
I'm curious, Leah. So in that plea deal, was there ever any discussion about the fact that you had a restraining order, that this person was stalking you and slashing tires and breaking into your house? And could it ever have been considered that it was some type of defense?
No, there is. At that time, my understanding is there was no self-defense law in the state of Ohio. First of all. Second of all, the court said, well, you invited him over, and it looks like you invited him over to shoot him. I did not do that, but that's what it looked like. So that's why that was off the table. And if I took it to court, I would definitely get out. I'm sure I would get out of attempted murder because, look, of all the circumstance. But truth be told, I did assault him. Whether it was justified or not, I still assaulted him. So the likelihood of me getting guilty for that. And besides, I called the police. It's not like I'm trying to hide it. So anyway, that's what happened.
So you decided to take the plea deal that was 4 years in state prison. I'm curious how this all went down with your kids.
Oh, it was awful. Well, our son was very, very angry at his father. And so as soon as I was sentenced to prison, my son moved to Missouri to be with my family, to move out to the farm with my brothers. My daughter, she started nursing school, and she was going through that process, but extremely hard on her. And then the youngest, the 6-year-old, now does not have a mommy because she's in prison. And my ex-husband ended up raising her the entire time I was incarcerated. So even though I was incarcerated, and let me go back. So, I was incarcerated for 4 years. I thought before very judgmentally about people who were incarcerated, and they were all evil. And then I got there and realized they were some of the most beautiful people I'd ever met in my life. There are a few inherently evil individuals in the world that go to prison, but most people were led there by bad mistakes, bad decisions, bad raising, bad relationships, addiction, all these things. They're not evil people. They made mistakes. So anyway, while I was incarcerated, I still had the opportunity to talk to all of my kids over the phone, and I had the opportunity even to talk to my youngest. As a matter of fact, soon after I went to prison, my ex-husband went to...
What level of prison? I was curious. I meant to ask you, when you went into prison, what level of prison do you go into with the type of charge you had?
The highest security prison in the state of Ohio for women. But I was not a high level individual because I was older. I had never had a criminal history, those kind of things. So my rating was very low, but I was in a high security prison. Just based
What was
on
that like for you to walk into a high security prison, not having anything but speeding tickets?
An absolute sickening culture shock. Sickening meaning I can't believe I'm here. I've completely destroyed my life. I've lost everything I worked so very hard for: a nursing license, money, houses, cars, reputation, and then for it to all be gone. It was so sickening. And then also the individuals that I was incarcerated with, many of them came from a hard background and a hard life in the streets and drugs, and the way they spoke wasn't the way that I learned to speak or speak around my people that way. And so I had to learn the culture, the prison dynamics, what to say, when to say it, who to say it to. So a lot of wisdom came from just watching and listening to people and just trying to maintain the peace. Because even if you're a peaceful individual, which I was, never got in trouble one time in prison, it's easy for people to turn on you and to want to cause conflict. So you're always trying to manage that and make sure you stay out of conflict.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So and I'm assuming that you said you constantly were talking to your kids, and so you had that contact. Did you, and one of the things that you also talked about, Leah, is that you started taking classes in there that were to try to learn how to forgive or introduce the idea of forgiving yourself, forgiving the situation. How did that all work?
I went to just about every Bible study they had. Like, the majority of my classes had a lot to do with that. And what I had to realize, I could not forgive myself for what I did. I could forgive everyone else, even the ex-husband. I could forgive everyone. I could not forgive myself. And then I realized, of course, this is my belief and how I see the world, but I realized that even though I had no idea that this was going to be part of my story, my journey, my future, I know that my God knew that this was going to happen. I knew that God knew this was going to happen and it was going to be part of my story. And I could not forgive myself for leaving my daughter, right? Like, she was my everything. But then I had to realize that I had to let go of the shame and forgive myself because it is part of her story too, right? And so even now, she's 20 years old, and I don't want to skip all the way to the future, but, has seriously considered being a counselor. She probably wouldn't have been like that if it wasn't for what she had gone through. And so I feel like she would have been a spoiled baby. She was the youngest and, was privileged essentially, right? And she was spoiled rotten, but her entire life changed in that moment as well.
Yeah.
And so I thought at the moment that I had destroyed everyone's life, but in some ways I might have, not on purpose, of course, strengthened everyone, but not on purpose, of course.
No, that's pretty profound, actually. So when you start thinking, Leah, that you're making these steps, a step at a time, forgiving yourself, getting healthier in that situation, you're getting closer to getting out, 6 months from getting out. What are you thinking, like, about going back out into society?
There was the human part of me that was utterly terrified because I had been in healthcare. I started working in a nursing home when I was 16 years old. And so all I had ever done was healthcare. A lot of people, when they're growing up, they have been a server or they worked in a factory or something. No, all I had ever done was healthcare, and I would be, based on my criminal record, completely banned from any kind of healthcare. So I was terrified, like, what in the world am I going to do? But on the faith side of me, it was like, okay, well, I know God's going to align the stars. I know he's going to make a way where there is no way, and he's going to take care of me. And so as soon as I was released from prison, one of my dear friends, who was also a nurse where I worked at a children's hospital, her parents had surgery, or one of them had surgery. They were elderly. And so she asked me to come help take care of them. And then the first car I bought cost $200. Now, this is in 2015. I just want you guys to think about what a $200 car.
I can't imagine what kind of car that would be for $200.
Well,
it did have an engine and ran, I guess.
I can tell you it was very embarrassing driving this car, especially coming from, driving like a Lincoln, right? So to driving. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, and then I started working at a faith-based recovery home. I spoke at a women's conference and was supernaturally connected with a guy from California that runs a prison ministry. And then they asked me to start it in the very same prison where I was incarcerated at. which was mind blowing. And they said, will you start this? And I'm like, okay, but I don't know how. And so I started doing that. And
wait, I don't want to just skirt over that.
what?
So you get the opportunity with the prison ministry to go back into the same prison that you just spent 4 years.
Yes, absolutely.
What was that like?
Crazy. And usually you have to be off parole for at least a year. They prefer even longer to go back into the prison. And so I signed up for this ministry at first named Kairos, and the warden had told me I couldn't come back. I was denied. And all these people that volunteer with Kairos started contacting the warden, like, you have to let her in. They were emailing her and calling her and blowing her up. So then she personally calls me the night before and says, I'm letting you in this prison, but you better not mess up. Now, here's the irony. She was the warden when I was incarcerated there, and she had no idea who I was, even though I'm the one that Dr. Phil came in and seen. So she should have known who I was. But when I met her, she said, oh, so you're Leah. She goes, and I thanked her for allowing me to come in. Well, about a month later, I'm guessing a month later, I asked to meet with her so I could come back in and bring in a whole different ministry. Okay. And so now, see, because she had heard from all those people to let me in, she knew who I was and she knew my character.
Leah, I didn't mean to skip over the part where you had Dr. Phil come into prison. I mean, what in the world was that like? And I guess what was it like and how did that happen? I mean, having Dr. Phil show up at a state prison, I mean, that's not really a normal thing, right?
No, very much not normal. My ex-husband had wrote Dr. Phil and said that he wanted to be on the show. And so my ex-husband and daughter and granddaughter flew to California to be on the show. And then, of course, Dr. Phil came into the prison and filmed me in prison. I thought that the show was going to be more about forgiveness. Like, that's what I was told. But coincidentally, it ended up being more about, they titled it The Love Triangle, and it ended up being a 2-day show. And so I'm still just trusting the Lord that he has a plan and a purpose, because if I was right.
What did the inmates think of that?
Well, I kept it a secret until the day of, so I didn't tell anyone. And then they had a little bit of an inmate audience in there, and so they got to talk. He said it was about domestic violence, but again, I wouldn't have spun it the way it was spun. I'll just leave it there. And it was a 2-day show that they kept it for Sweeps Week or whatever. So not every day does he go into a prison to interview. He told me that the reason that he decided to come interview me was because he said evil people do not give their organs away. And he said, I had heard that you gave your mother-in-law, your ex-mother-in-law, your kidney. And so I knew that you had to be a really good person. And, you know, he wanted people to see that even really good people could make major mistakes and end up in prison. So.
Yeah. And you told me that over the phone. That was your ex-mother-in-law you gave your kidney to, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Very
interesting how that all transpired, but that's really something that you did that, because that's, you know, that you were a match. It wasn't your child or husband or whatever the case, but it was your ex-mother-in-law, which probably saved her life. So anyway, jumping back to where you were, you said you had the warden, and you get this going back in, and you're going to bring more people in. How does all this go? And what did it feel like for you to go back into the prison?
Well, of course, I was really nervous because I'm meeting with the warden, and the guy from California flew in so he could meet with us as well. And we're telling him all about this program. And then she goes, oh, well, let me show you into my office. And she takes us into her office. And the ministry at the time that we were bringing in, her entire office was decorated from an event of that ministry. So it was like the Lord had prepared the way. She already knew about the ministry because all the people were calling her. She already knew of who I was and what I was about. And then, of course, I had my pastor and his wife support. And so it was just absolutely amazing. But I can tell you that I went into that prison twice a week, every week for years, except for during COVID because they locked everybody out. And I can also tell you that for the first at least year, even though I was calm and at peace and inside I didn't feel like terrified, you could look at like the back of my jeans and they were just shaking and vibrating. So my body was still reacting to the sound of the doors and the incarceration, even though I didn't necessarily feel scared. But it was powerful because, too, I had just been in that prison, right? So when I go back in the prison, even through the windows and the barred windows, people are screaming my name. And they were just a lot of tears.
Oh, how long had it been? How long? I didn't ask you that. How long had it been from the time you got out to the time you went in?
Probably about 2.5 years before I came back in. And so, you know, they were all crying and stuff because they're like, most people forget about us, right? You said you were coming back, because I knew when I was incarcerated that I not only committed I would serve God the rest of my life, but I would go back and love the people I left behind, having no idea how that was going to happen. But look, I mean, supernaturally, it just happened. So it was really powerful to go back in there, and still is. Ironically, last week I went into the very prison where I was incarcerated at and talked to ladies there, and still know people who are incarcerated there.
Yeah, that's got to be something. And tell the audience about how this happened with your husband.
With the victim awareness class?
Yes.
Yes. So I had always enjoyed our victim awareness teacher, who was also a corrections officer. And so we were always trying to get my ex-husband. My ex-husband always wanted to come into the prison to do visits with me, right? We had made peace and talked through all the issues and talk about co-parenting and all that, but the prison would never let him in because he was my victim, right?
Right.
So then he and I went in together after I was out. That same officer said, hey, you want to come talk? So we spoke together. So it's always powerful when victims talk to people who are incarcerated so that they can understand the pain, all the trauma they brought to that individual. But imagine the person who is the offender and the victim in the same place. But as we described it, we were both offenders and we were both victims.
Yeah.
Right? Because what he did and what I did, we both had equal shares in the process.
And you forgave each other.
Yes. Yes, we've forgiven each other. As a matter of fact, I texted him, I think it was on his birthday, and coincidentally, I happened to have shot him 3 days before his birthday, and so I said, I'm sorry. And he said, would you please stop saying you're sorry? He said, we may not be married, but we are great parents, great grandparents together. We are friends. And he said, and by the way, you gave us an awesome story. So stop.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, after, all this has happened, do you think he's changed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes and no. I don't have that much interaction with him except for parenting and co-parenting. So it would be unfair for me to completely analyze him because I'm not around him enough to. I think that he's changed a lot. He's been through his own battles since that happened. And so I think that he's thinking more about like taking care of his children and being a better individual. I just don't know that he has completely stopped being dishonest or lost his narcissistic tendencies. So that's unfair for me to say.
Yeah, it's probably the way he's wired. So now, currently, you're doing the prison ministry, going in 4 states, all kinds of different prisons. You're speaking as a speaker. considering where you were, being a nurse and worrying that that was all taken away, and now you're doing something that you're passionate about. What do you think's your greatest takeaway from all this that you've been through?
I believe that nothing happens by happenstance. I don't believe in any coincidences whatsoever. I used to work on the body, and now I work on the soul.
I love
And
that.
so it's very, very powerful that the people who are incarcerated feel left behind, feel hopeless, feel like they have destroyed everything. What's the worth in living? And so it's powerful when I can go in and say, I was incarcerated. And look what has happened throughout my life. Look at how God has transformed things. And so I don't want to say like power in a negative sense, but in a lot of ways, I have automatic authority inside of a prison because I'm one of them. So I can speak differently to them. I can be more raw with them. And whatever I say has more validity because I was there. And so I'm just honored because God has allowed me to use this horrible situation and the biggest mistake of my life to help transform probably thousands and thousands of people. So having been a nurse, how many patients can you take care of in a day, in a week, in a lifetime, right? But to be able to help people transform, and you've said it on your show at least a couple times, that talking about getting freedom. There are people that are not inside of a prison that are more captive than the people who are in a prison. They have their own prison of their mind, their addiction, the society norms, what people think you should or shouldn't do. All those things hold us captive. And the freedom that came from my own incarceration, the peace that I have, the strength that I have, the faith and hope that I have. I tell people all the time, before I went to prison, I knew God. When I was in prison, I found my daddy and my best friend. And so you can take everything from me. You can take my home. I can become homeless. You can take my job. You can take everything, but you can't take my faith, my hope, my strength, my memories. So it almost, like I started to say, it empowered who I am. And also, having been incarcerated when I was 17, I didn't know who I was. How could I possibly know who I was at 17 years old, right? And so it helped me figure out who I am, what I want in life, and less dependent on other people. It's just,
You gain
prison is
confidence.
horrific, but it was one of the best things that's ever happened to me in my life.
I think it's fascinating. I think you were helping people being a nurse, and now you're helping people going in, and like you said, and I do so identify with you're saying. When you go to prison, you see people, as you walk around, you see people who've lost hope, and you can see it in their eyes, and when they lose hope, they have no ability to move forward. And you see that on the outside too. People that are, they're stuck in a bad job, a bad marriage, a health crisis, whatever those things are that get you stuck, they lose hope. And what you said, when this all happened to you, just got to take it a step at a time, and you start stepping into the unknowns, and they become knowns. And once they become known, you can deal with it. And I think that's one of those things in life that if you hit rock bottom, you learn, because you either get in a fetal position or you start stepping out. And Leah, that's what you did. You kept stepping, and now you're in a position in life where whatever happens the rest of your life, you've got your family and you've got a passion of helping people. And I think that's wonderful. No telling what you'll do from here on out.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. If I could being in prisons is sadly enough, it's my happy spot, besides my family, of course, right?
Sure.
My family's everything. Yeah. But that's where I'm happy. When I know I'm going to a prison, it gives me joy and it gives me life, because I know what it's like to sit there and feel so depressed and so sad, and to put a smile on their face and to give them hope. It just does everything for me. I love it.
Yeah. It's got to be rewarding to be able to have the experience that you've had, to be able to give back and go back in and give people the opportunity to see a pathway for hope. And it changes people's lives, regardless of how long they're in there, that can change their life. How do people get a hold of you, Leah?
Oh, goodness. My email address is Leah Jeans, Jeans,
Okay.
35 at gmail.com.
Great. I think there'll be people want to get a hold of you. Uh, Talking about gratitude and things of hope, I want to thank Homestead Financial lets me use this nice podcast studio here, all the fancy equipment, the lights and the cameras. If anybody's got home mortgage needs, it's Greg Afdiev. He knows all that stuff. Just reach out to him at Homestead Financial. Hey, if anybody's looking for a book out there, obviously Leah needs to write a book. I've got a book. It's called Nightmare Success. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Keep the likes and the comments and the shares, subscriptions and follows going. If you've got time, leave a review on Apple. It helps the show. Check me out on BrentCassity.com. It's my website. I spell it wrong. It's with a TY, not a DY. As I used to say to my people, as I was writing my emails back and forth from Leavenworth, stay strong. I'll do the same. Leah, thanks so much for sharing your story today. It's absolutely incredibly fascinating, and I love what you're doing now.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I hope it inspires others to keep on taking the next step.
Keep taking the next step. Nightmare Success, in and out.